The night shift at Dallas Interstellar Transit Hub was usually quiet, and that's exactly how Derek liked it. At 41 years old, he had been pushing a mop and cleaning corridors for almost 8 years now. The pay wasn't great, but it was honest work, and Derek took pride in keeping the place spotless. Most nights, he was completely alone except for the occasional security guard making rounds. Tonight felt different though. Derek couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as he made his way down Corridor 7, his cleaning cart squeaking slightly with each step. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that familiar sterile glow. He was heading toward the waste disposal area when he heard it, a small, frightened sound like a whimper. Derek stopped and listened. There it was again. He left his cart and walked slowly toward the noise, past the large shipping containers that were waiting to be loaded onto tomorrow's cargo ships. That's when he saw it. Behind a stack of metal crates there was a child. But not a human child. The small figure had pale blue skin that almost seemed to glow in the dim light, and large dark eyes that reminded Derek of a frightened deer. The child was tiny, maybe 3 feet tall, and was pressing itself against the wall like it was trying to disappear into the concrete. Derek's first instinct was to reach for his radio. This was definitely not normal. Unauthorized aliens, especially children, in a restricted area was serious business. There were protocols for this sort of thing. He was supposed to call security, fill out forms, let the professionals handle it. But then he really looked at the kid. The child was covered in cuts and bruises. Its clothing, some kind of shimmery silver material, was torn in several places and stained with dirt. But what really got to Derek was how thin the child looked. He could see its ribs through the torn fabric. This kid hadn't eaten in a long time. Derek slowly lowered his radio back onto his belt. He crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. The child flinched and let out a scared sound. "Hey there," Derek said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The child stared at him with those huge eyes, trembling. Derek realized the kid probably didn't understand a word he was saying, but maybe his tone would help. He stayed crouched there for a minute, just letting the child get used to his presence. Then Derek had an idea. He slowly reached into his lunch bag that was hanging from his cleaning cart. He pulled out the sandwich his landlady had packed for him, turkey with lettuce and tomato on whole wheat bread. It wasn't fancy, but it was food. "You hungry?" Derek asked, holding out the sandwich. He made eating motions with his other hand, hoping the kid would understand. The child's eyes locked onto that sandwich like it was made of gold. Derek could actually see the kid's throat move as it swallowed. After what felt like forever, a small, trembling hand reached out. The child snatched the sandwich and immediately started eating it. Not just eating, devouring. The kid didn't even chew properly, just shoved the food into its mouth as fast as possible. Derek felt his heart break a little. How long had this child been starving? He reached back into his lunch bag and pulled out the apple he'd brought. The child grabbed that too and ate it, core and all. Then came the granola bar. Gone in seconds. When the food was finished, the child looked up at Derek with an expression he recognized, gratitude mixed with desperate hope. Those big eyes were wet with tears that hadn't fallen yet. "Okay, let's see about those cuts," Derek said gently. He went back to his cart and got his first aid kit. He'd always kept a good one since there were plenty of small accidents in a place this size. When he approached again, the child didn't run away. That seemed like progress. Derek cleaned the worst of the scrapes as carefully as he could. The kid winced but didn't make a sound, showing a kind of toughness that seemed way too mature for someone so small. He applied antiseptic and bandages to the deeper cuts. The child watched everything he did with intense focus. They couldn't talk to each other, but Derek found they didn't really need words. He would point at something and make a gesture, and the kid would understand. When Derek pointed at his own chest and said, "Derek," the child seemed to get it, though it couldn't repeat the name properly. The child was exhausted. Derek could see it in the way those small shoulders sagged. He looked around and spotted a sheltered alcove behind some equipment. It wasn't much, but it was hidden from casual view and out of the way of the security cameras. Derek grabbed some clean towels from his cart and his spare jacket from his locker. He made a little bed in the alcove, laying everything out as comfortably as he could. The child watched all of this with wide eyes. When the makeshift bed was ready, Derek gestured toward it. The child hesitated for just a moment, then crawled into the nest of towels. Derek draped his jacket over the small form like a blanket. The child immediately curled up, and Derek could see the exhaustion finally winning over fear. Before those big eyes closed completely, the child did something that made Derek's throat tight. One small hand reached out from under the jacket and grabbed Derek's finger. Just held it there for a moment, a tiny gesture of trust that meant everything. "You're safe now," Derek whispered, even though he knew the kid couldn't understand. "I promise. You're safe." He left his water bottle and the emergency protein bars from his first aid kit within easy reach. Then he forced himself to stand up and go back to work. He still had 3 hours left on his shift, and he needed to finish his rounds or someone would come looking for him. But Derek couldn't focus on cleaning that night. His mind kept going back to that small, frightened face, to those bruises and cuts, to the desperate way the child had eaten his food. What had happened to this kid? Where were its parents? Who could abandon a child like that? As his shift ended and the first light of dawn started creeping through the windows, Derek made his decision. He wasn't going to report this. Not yet, anyway. Something told him that if he handed this child over to the system, bad things might happen. The kid was terrified of something, and until Derek understood what, he was going to keep it safe. He would come back tonight with real food. With warm clothes that would fit better. Maybe with a medical scanner if he could borrow one from his buddy who worked in the cargo bay. Whatever this child's story was, Derek was going to make sure it got a chance at a better ending. As he walked toward the employee exit, the morning sun hitting his tired face, Derek had no idea that this simple choice, to share his sandwich with a hungry child, was about to change everything. Not just for him but for the entire human race. Sometimes the biggest moments in history start with the smallest acts of kindness. Derek was about to prove that in a way nobody could have imagined. Derek barely slept that day. He kept thinking about the child hiding in that alcove, alone and scared. As soon as he got home to his tiny apartment, he started planning. First stop was the corner store where he bought juice boxes, crackers, fresh fruit and some protein bars. Then he went to the second-hand shop and picked up a couple of small blankets and a warm hoodie that might fit. His landlady, Mrs. Rodriguez, caught him on the stairs carrying all the bags. She was a sweet older woman who sometimes made extra food for Derek since she knew he worked long hours. "Planning a picnic or something?" she asked with a curious smile. "Something like that," Derek replied, managing a tired grin. He couldn't exactly tell her the truth. "Hey, I'm harboring an alien child at my workplace. That would go over well." Back in his apartment, Derek collapsed on his couch and pulled out his phone. He was scrolling through the news when a headline made his stomach drop. "Urgent, missing Kree diplomat's child. Massive galactic search underway." Derek's hands shook as he read the article. A child from one of the most powerful alien civilizations had disappeared 3 days ago. Kidnapped, they said. The Kree government was turning the galaxy upside down looking for this kid. And they were offering a reward that made Derek's eyes go wide. 5 million credits. 5 million credits. Derek stared at that number for a long time. That was more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. He could pay off every debt he had. He could get his mom into that better care facility she needed. He could help his younger brother finish medical school. He could finally fix his car that kept breaking down. He could actually buy a house instead of renting this cramped apartment. All he had to do was make one phone call. Derek saved the tip line number in his phone. His finger hovered over the call button. It would be so easy. Just call, give them the location, collect the reward. The kid would be safe, return to its family. Everyone wins, right? But something stopped him. He kept seeing those terrified eyes. The way the child had flinched at every sound. The desperate hunger. The bruises. This wasn't a kid who had been gently taken and well cared for. This was a kid who had been hurt and then abandoned. What if the kidnappers were still watching? What if they had contacts in law enforcement? What if calling the official channels put the child in more danger? And honestly, what if the system just didn't care enough? The kid was an alien. Would they really treat it with kindness, or would it become evidence in some investigation, poked and prodded and questioned? Derek threw his phone across the couch. "You're an idiot," he told himself. A complete idiot. But he knew he wasn't going to make that call. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some things mattered more than money. That evening, Derek went back to the transit hub with his backpack stuffed full of supplies. His heart was pounding as he approached the alcove. What if the child was gone? What if security had found it? What if something worse had happened? But the small blue form was still there, sitting up now, awake and alert. When those big dark eyes saw Derek, they actually brightened. The child made a happy sound and stood up. "Hey kiddo," Derek said softly, kneeling down and unpacking the food. "I brought you some better stuff." The child ate again, though more slowly this time. Derek was relieved to see that. Yesterday's desperate starvation seemed to have eased a little. He handed over the blankets and the hoodie, and watched as the child touched the soft fabric with wonder, like it had never felt anything so comfortable. Derek had also borrowed something from his friend Luis who worked in the cargo bay, A universal translator. It was an older model, kind of clunky, but it should work for basic communication. He activated the device and spoke slowly into it. "Can you understand me now?" The child's eyes went huge as the translator converted Derek's words into what he assumed was the Cree language. The kid nodded so hard its whole body moved, then started speaking rapidly. The translator took a moment to process, then converted it to English. Yes, I understand. Thank you for helping me. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die here. The bad people took me from my home. They kept me in a dark room. Then they left me here and never came back. I've been hiding for days. I was so hungry and everything hurt and I didn't know what to do." Derek felt anger rising in his chest. What kind of monsters kidnap a child and then just abandon it? "What's your name, sweetheart?" The child spoke a phrase that the translator couldn't quite handle. It came out as a jumbled mess of sounds that no human could pronounce. Derek smiled gently. "That's a beautiful name, but I don't think my mouth can make those sounds. How about I call you Scout? Would that be okay?" The child considered this seriously, then nodded with a small smile. "Scout. I like it. It sounds adventurous. Nice to meet you, Scout. I'm Derek." He held out his hand and Scout grabbed it with both small hands, shaking it enthusiastically. Over the next hour, through halting translation, Derek learned the whole terrible story. Scout had been taken by some political group trying to force Scout's parent to release prisoners. But Scout's parent had refused to negotiate with criminals. Instead, they had mobilized every resource to find their child. This had scared the kidnappers. When they realized they weren't going to get what they wanted and that a massive search was underway, they panicked. They had dumped Scout at the transit hub, figuring someone would find the child quickly in such a busy place. But Scout had been so terrified, so traumatized, that the kid had hidden from everyone. Anyone in a uniform, anyone who looked official, Scout was afraid they might be more kidnappers. So for 3 days Scout had survived on trash and sink water, getting weaker and more scared. "You're safe now," Derek promised. "But we need to get you home to your parent. They must be going crazy with worry." Scout's face showed fear again. "Will you come with me? Please? You're the only one I trust." Derek's practical side was screaming at him. This was insane. He was a janitor, not a diplomat. He had no business getting involved in galactic politics. But looking at Scout's pleading expression, he couldn't say no. "Okay, we'll do this together. But we need to be smart about it, all right?" Using Luis's cargo clearance codes and the transit hub's secure communication system, Derek managed to send an encrypted message directly to the Kree diplomatic mission. He kept it simple: "Child is safe and healthy. We'll arrange secure handoff tomorrow evening. Stand by for location." The response came back in less than a minute. Message received. The Sovereign is personally en route to Earth. Provide exact coordinates immediately. This is highest priority. Derek stared at the screen. The Sovereign. That meant Scout's parent wasn't just some diplomat. This was the actual ruler of the Kree Empire. He had saved the child of a king. Or queen. Or whatever the Kree equivalent was. "Well," he said to Scout, who was wrapped in one of the blankets and drinking a juice box, "I guess we'd better make sure you look presentable. Your parent is coming and they sound pretty important." Scout nodded seriously. "My parent is the leader of all Kree. They're very powerful. But also very kind. You'll like them." Derek hoped Scout was right. He sent the coordinates for a secure loading bay, then settled in to wait with Scout. They played simple hand games and Derek told Scout about Earth, about oceans and mountains and pizza, which Scout found fascinating. As the hours passed, Derek felt a strange calm settle over him. He had made his choice. No reward money, no recognition, just doing what felt right. Whatever happened next, at least he could say he had helped a kid in trouble. What Derek didn't know was that his simple act of kindness was about to create ripples that would change human history forever. Sometimes being a good person is enough. Sometimes it's everything. Derek woke up to his phone exploding with notifications. 53 missed calls. Over 100 text messages. His neighbor was calling again, and this time Derek answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Derek, thank God. Are you okay? Look outside your window right now." Mrs. Rodriguez sounded absolutely panicked. Derek stumbled out of bed and pulled back his curtain. What he saw made his brain completely freeze. The morning sky wasn't blue anymore. It was black. Black with ships. Hundreds and hundreds of spacecraft filled the air above his neighborhood. They ranged from small fighter ships to absolutely massive cruisers that looked like floating cities. And they were all hovering in perfect formation directly above his apartment building. "Oh no," Derek whispered. "Oh no, this can't be happening." He had given them the coordinates for the secure loading bay at the transit hub, not his home address. But the Kree had obviously tracked where his message came from. They had identified him, found out where he lived, and decided to show up with what looked like half their military fleet. Derek threw on clothes as fast as he could and rushed outside. His quiet neighborhood looked like something from an alien invasion movie. News helicopters circled at a distance, their cameras no doubt broadcasting this to the entire world. Police cars blocked every street. Military vehicles were positioned at every corner. His neighbors were all outside, some looking terrified, others recording everything on their phones. Kids were pointing at the sky and shouting excitedly. A group of men in dark suits appeared the moment Derek stepped onto his porch. "Derek Hammond? Yeah, that's me. Listen, I can explain why I didn't." "We're not here to arrest you, Mr. Hammond," the lead agent interrupted. "We're here to escort you. The sovereign of the Kree Empire has requested to meet you immediately." Derek's legs felt like jelly as they guided him through the crowd. Mrs. Rodriguez gave him a thumbs up and shouted, "You're a hero, Derek." His neighbor from across the street, Mr. Thompson, was telling his kids, "That's Mr. Derek. He saved an alien prince." People were asking for selfies. It was completely surreal. The largest ship began descending, and Derek had to shield his eyes from the bright blue thrusters. The vessel was absolutely enormous, probably the size of 3 city blocks. It settled onto a hastily constructed landing pad with surprising gentleness for something so massive. A ramp extended from the ship's belly, and armored guards marched out in perfect formation. Their ceremonial armor gleamed in the morning sunlight, making them look like warriors from some ancient legend. Then the Sovereign emerged and Derek forgot how to breathe. The Sovereign was massive, nearly 8 feet tall with deep blue skin covered in intricate markings that seemed to shimmer and move. They wore armor that looked like it was made from liquid starlight, constantly shifting colors. But it was their presence that really got Derek. This was someone who commanded respect without saying a word. Someone who ruled billions of people across countless worlds. Someone who could probably destroy entire planets if they wanted to. And they were walking straight toward Derek. Every instinct Derek had was screaming at him to run. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. This was too much. He was just a janitor who mopped floors for minimum wage. He shouldn't be standing here meeting alien royalty in his 10-year-old jeans and work boots. "Derek." A small voice cut through Derek's panic. Scout broke away from the formation of guards and ran straight to him. The child crashed into Derek's legs and hugged him tight. Derek automatically knelt down and hugged Scout back, relief flooding through him. Scout was clean now, dressed in beautiful clothes that looked expensive, and most importantly, the kid looked happy and healthy. The Sovereign stopped a few feet away. Then Derek heard a sound that completely surprised him. Laughter. Deep and genuine, filtered through the translator device. "My child insisted on seeing you first," the Sovereign said, their voice warm despite its depth. "They would not take another step until I agreed." Derek stood slowly, keeping one hand on Scout's shoulder. He felt better with the kid close. "I'm just glad Scout is okay. I was worried something might happen before you got here." "You were worried?" The Sovereign's tone changed, became more serious. "You who could have claimed 5 million credits by simply calling our embassy. You who gave up potential wealth beyond imagination. You fed my child your own food. Gave your own jacket. Asked nothing in return. Why?" Derek looked down at Scout, then back at the towering figure before him. Because Scout was scared and hurt and hungry. No kid should have to go through that. "I just did what anyone would do." "No." The Sovereign's voice was firm. "Not anyone. In the 3 days my child was missing, hundreds of humans passed by. Security officers. Travelers. Other workers like yourself. They all saw. No one helped. Only you stopped. Only you cared enough to act." Derek glanced at the crowd of neighbors and officials watching this whole exchange. "I still don't understand why you brought an entire fleet. I was going to meet you at the transit hub like we planned." "These ships are not a threat or a show of force," the Sovereign explained, placing a large hand over their chest in what looked like a salute. "This is an honor guard. You saved the heir to the Kree Empire. You showed compassion when you could have shown greed. You protected when you could have exploited. In our culture, such actions demand the highest recognition." "I really don't need recognition," Derek said honestly. "I just wanted Scout to get home safe." The Sovereign made that laughing sound again. "This response tells me everything. My advisors said humans were unique. That you help simply because you cannot do otherwise. I see now they were correct." Scout tugged on Derek's hand. "I told my parent everything. How you shared your food even though you didn't have much. How you were gentle when you fixed my cuts. How you made me feel safe for the first time in days. You're a hero, Derek. I'm not a hero, Scout. I'm just a guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time. That humility, the Sovereign said, and Derek could hear emotion in the translated voice, is exactly what makes you extraordinary. For 3 days, I feared I would never see my child again. The faction that took Scout wanted me to compromise our justice system. To release dangerous criminals. To show weakness that would encourage more kidnappings. I refused because a leader cannot negotiate with terrorists, no matter the personal cost. But every hour that passed, I imagined Scout suffering. Alone. Afraid. Perhaps dying in the dark. Scout squeezed Derek's hand tighter. The Sovereign continued, then a message arrived. A janitor earning barely enough to survive had given everything he could to protect a stranger. Had asked no questions about reward or status. Saw only a child who needed help. The Sovereign knelt down, an action that made several guards shift nervously, and looked Derek directly in the eyes. They were now face to face, and Derek could see something he hadn't expected in those alien features. Tears. The Sovereign had tears in their eyes. You gave me back my child, Derek Hammond. You gave me back my reason for living. There is no reward worthy of such a gift. But I will try. By the ancient laws of my people, I declare you a keeper of the royal line. You are now and forever a guardian of my house, with all rights and privileges that entails. Derek blinked. I'm sorry, what does that actually mean? An official stepped forward, consulting a holographic display. It means you hold status equivalent to a Kree High Lord. You have access to the full resources of the Empire. You may call upon our military hour. No, Derek interrupted. Thank you, but no. I appreciate the thought, really. But I don't want titles or status. I don't need access to fleets or resources. I just want to know that Scout is going to be okay and happy. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the news helicopters seemed to stop moving. The Sovereign stared at Derek with an expression that might have been shock. Scout looked surprised. Every official and guard was frozen. You refuse the greatest honor our civilization can bestow? The official finally asked, sounding genuinely confused. I'm not refusing to be Scout's friend, Derek clarified quickly. Scout can visit whenever they want. I'd love that. But I don't need to be a lord or whatever. I'm a janitor. That's who I am, and I'm okay with that. The Sovereign stood slowly, still staring at Derek. Then they started laughing again, louder this time. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. You refuse power and wealth as easily as others grasp for them. They turned to their officials. Inform the High Council immediately. I wish to establish a formal alliance between the Kree Empire and humanity. This man has shown us something we had forgotten, the power of simple goodness. Derek held up his hands. Wait, I'm not sure I should be the foundation for interplanetary politics. I'm really not qualified for any of this. Why not? The Sovereign asked. You demonstrate what your species values: compassion over profit, kindness over law, courage over safety. If more humans are like you, then we would be honored to call Earth our ally. Scout nodded enthusiastically. Derek says humans help each other just because it's right. Not for rewards or recognition. I want our people to learn that. The Sovereign placed a hand on Scout's head affectionately, then extended their other hand to Derek. Then it is decided. With your permission, I would like you to serve as a bridge between our peoples. Not as a politician or diplomat. Simply as a teacher. Show us what it means to be human at your best. Derek looked at that outstretched hand. This was completely insane. He had barely graduated high school. He lived paycheck to paycheck. He was nobody special. But then he thought about Scout hiding behind those crates, starving and terrified. He thought about how sharing one sandwich had led to this impossible moment. Maybe he wasn't qualified. Maybe that was exactly the point. Maybe the galaxy didn't need more politicians and warriors. Maybe it needed regular people showing how to care for each other. Derek shook the Sovereign's hand. I'll try my best. Can't promise I'll be any good at it, but I'll try. Scout cheered and hugged his leg again. The Sovereign smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed their imposing features into something almost paternal. That is all anyone can ask. Now, shall we discuss practical arrangements? You will obviously need. I'm keeping my apartment, Derek said firmly. If I'm supposed to teach you about being human, you need to understand that we don't need palaces to have good lives. My place is small, but it's enough. The Sovereign looked at Derek for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand. You will teach us much, Derek Hammond. This I know with certainty. As they walked toward the ship to discuss details, Derek realized his quiet life was officially over. But looking at Scout's happy face, he thought maybe this change was okay. Maybe even good. After all, it had started with one sandwich and one choice to help. How complicated could the rest possibly be? Retry. The Sovereign insisted on having their formal meeting inside Derek's apartment, which sent the entire diplomatic team into a quiet panic. Security officers looked horrified. Official advisors kept trying to suggest alternative locations. But the Sovereign was firm, and when you rule an empire, people listen. Derek rushed ahead to do some quick cleaning, though there wasn't much he could do about the worn carpet or the water stain on the ceiling. The Sovereign had to duck to fit through the doorway, and when they stood in Derek's living room, their head nearly touched the ceiling. Scout bounced onto the old couch excitedly, treating it like an adventure. The Sovereign carefully lowered themselves into Derek's only armchair, which groaned under the weight but somehow held. Two guards positioned themselves by the door while a Kree official in elaborate robes set up some kind of holographic recording device on Derek's coffee table. "Sorry about the place," Derek said, feeling ridiculous. Here he was apologizing to alien royalty about his second-hand furniture. "It's not much, but it's home. Do not apologize." The Sovereign's voice was gentle, almost sad. "This dwelling tells me more truth than any palace could. You work 2 jobs, correct? Our records show employment at the transit hub and at a restaurant." Derek shifted uncomfortably. Of course they had looked into his background. "Yeah, just trying to pay the bills. My mom needs medication that's pretty expensive, and I help my younger brother with his college tuition when I can." Yet when offered 5 million credits through official channels, you remained silent. When you could have sold your story to news organizations for substantial payment, you protected my child's privacy and safety. Explain this to me. Derek looked at Scout, who was now examining a framed photo of Derek's family with curious interest. Because Scout's not a lottery ticket. Scout's a kid who was terrified and alone and hurt. "I've been scared before. I've been hungry before. I know what that feels like. Money doesn't change what the right thing to do is." The Sovereign leaned forward, and Derek noticed the way the light caught those intricate markings on their skin. "Derek Hammond, I must help you understand something about Kree culture. We are an ancient civilization with traditions that go back thousands of years. When someone saves the life of a royal family member, especially the heir, a sacred bond is formed. We call it a life debt. This is not a casual thing. It is absolute and binding." "Okay," Derek said slowly. "But I don't need anything in return. I told you that." The Sovereign held up a hand. "Please let me finish. For 3 days and nights I could not sleep. I could not eat. Every moment I thought about Scout somewhere in the darkness, suffering, calling for me. The faction that kidnapped my child wanted me to release violent criminals from detention. To undermine our entire justice system. To show weakness that would invite more such attacks. I refused because to negotiate with kidnappers only guarantees more children will be taken. But the cost." The Sovereign's voice cracked slightly. "The cost of that decision was almost more than I could bear." Scout climbed off the couch and went to their parent, taking the large hand in both small ones. "But Derek found me. He saved me." "Yes." The Sovereign looked at Derek with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. A man who earns minimum wage, who works through the night to support his family, gave his own food to a stranger. Gave his jacket, his time, his care, his compassion. He did not ask about status or reward. He saw only a child in need and acted. "This is who you are." The Sovereign stood, and Derek quickly stood as well, nearly knocking over his water glass in the process. "By the ancient codes of my people, I declare you keeper of the royal line, Derek Hammond. You are now and forever a protector of my house and bloodline." Derek rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "I appreciate that, really. But what does that actually mean in practice?" The official with the recording device spoke up, consulting his holographic display. "It means you are granted status equivalent to a Kree High Lord. You may request audience with the Sovereign at any time. You have access to Kree military resources. You may call upon Imperial wealth. You may." "No." Derek shook his head firmly. "Thank you, but no. I don't want any of that." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The Sovereign stared at Derek like he had just spoken in an unknown language. Even Scout looked confused. "You refuse?" the official asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not refusing to be Scout's friend," Derek clarified. "Scout's welcome here anytime. I meant what I said about that. But I don't need titles or access to fleets or whatever. I'm a janitor. That's my job and I'm good at it. That's enough for me." The sovereign made a sound that Derek had learned meant they were deeply moved. In 5,000 years of Kree history, no one has ever refused this honor. Most would kill for such status. You turn it away as if it means nothing. It's not that it means nothing, Derek tried to explain. It's just that it's not why I helped. I didn't help Scout to get something in return. I helped because it was the right thing to do. If I take rewards and titles now, it changes what that action meant. Does that make sense? The sovereign sat back down heavily, still staring at Derek. It makes perfect sense. And that is precisely why you are extraordinary. They turned to Scout. What do you think, little one? You know this human best. What should we do? Scout thought about this seriously. Derek says humans help each other because it makes communities strong. Not for personal gain. I think we should learn from that. I think we should try to understand what makes humans different. The sovereign nodded slowly. Wise words. They looked back at Derek. I have a different proposal then. Will you serve as a cultural liaison between Earth and the Kree Empire? Not as a diplomat bound by politics. Not as a noble with obligations. Simply as yourself, a human who can teach us what we have forgotten. Teach you what? Derek asked, genuinely confused. How to care without expectation. How to help without hesitation. How to build a society where a janitor earning minimum wage has more honor than our highest nobles. The sovereign's voice carried real emotion now. We Kree have become rigid. We follow laws and protocols. We value order and hierarchy. But somewhere along the way we forgot simple kindness. You have shown us what we lost. Derek thought about this. It still seemed crazy. He wasn't a teacher or a philosopher. He was just a guy who mopped floors and tried to be decent to people. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the galaxy didn't need another fancy speech about values. Maybe it needed someone to show what those values looked like in everyday life. Okay, Derek said finally. I'll try. But I have conditions. The official looked scandalized that Derek was making demands to the sovereign, but the sovereign just smiled and gestured for him to continue. First, I keep my job at the transit hub. I'm not quitting. Second, I stay in this apartment. No palaces or special housing. Third, anything I teach has to be based on real human experience, not politics or propaganda. And fourth, Scout comes to visit regularly so we can stay friends. Those are my terms. The sovereign stood and placed their hand over their heart in that Kree salute gesture. Agreed. All of it. Though I must insist on one addition. We will establish a fund to help with your mother's medical care and your brother's education. Not as payment but as family helping family. Scout considers you important, which makes you important to me as well. Derek's throat felt tight. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Scout urged, tugging on Derek's sleeve. Please say yes. I want to learn about Earth. I want to understand what makes you so kind. Derek looked at Scout's hopeful face, then at the sovereign's earnest expression, then at his tiny apartment that somehow held alien royalty without collapsing. This was the weirdest day of his life and it kept getting weirder. But maybe weird was okay. Maybe weird was even good. Yes, Derek said. I'll do it. Scout cheered and hugged him. The sovereign smiled that warm smile again. The official looked relieved that diplomatic protocols could finally resume. The guards remained stoic, but Derek thought he saw one of them almost smile. There is one more thing, the sovereign said. The High Council will want to establish a formal alliance with Earth. Your act of kindness has shown us that humanity deserves to be recognized as more than a minor species. You have elevated your entire planet's standing in the galactic community. Derek sat down heavily on his couch. I just shared a sandwich. Yes, the sovereign agreed. You shared a sandwich. And in doing so you changed everything. Small acts have large consequences, Derek Hammond. You are living proof of that truth. As the meeting continued and they discussed logistics and timelines, Derek kept thinking about that moment behind the shipping containers. Finding Scout, scared and starving. Making the choice to help instead of walking away. It had seemed so simple at the time. Just basic human decency. But maybe that was humanity's real strength. Not technology or weapons or grand strategies. Just the simple, consistent choice to help each other. To share what little they had. To see someone suffering and decide to care. If that was what the galaxy needed to learn, then maybe Derek really was the right person to teach it. Not because he was special, but because he was ordinary. Because he proved that you didn't need to be powerful or rich or important to make a difference. Sometimes you just needed to be kind. And apparently, that was revolutionary enough to change the fate of worlds. 6 months had passed since that crazy morning when 300 spaceships appeared over Derek's apartment. Now Derek stood in the Human Cree Cultural Center in downtown Dallas, watching a group of Cree diplomats try pizza for the first time. Their reactions were priceless. Some looked confused, others seemed pleasantly surprised, and one diplomat was already reaching for a third slice. "The combination is unusual but satisfying," Ambassador Thane said, carefully examining a piece of pepperoni. "On my world, we typically do not combine meat with bread and fermented dairy in this manner." "Yeah, but that's missing the whole point," Derek replied, sprinkling some red pepper flakes on his slice. "Pizza isn't just food. It's what people share when they celebrate, when they're sad, when they just want to feel connected to each other. That emotional connection is what makes it special." Scout, who now visited Earth twice a month, grabbed another slice with the enthusiasm of a seasoned pizza lover. The child had become a natural bridge between both worlds, soaking up human culture like a sponge while teaching Derek about Cree traditions. "Can we visit Mrs. Rodriguez after this? She promised to show me her cookie recipe." "Sure thing, kiddo." Derek ruffled Scout's hair, a gesture the child had come to love even though it had taken weeks to explain that humans showed affection through casual touch. The cultural center had been Derek's idea. When the Cree wanted to build him a mansion as thanks, Derek had suggested something better, a place where humans and Cree could actually meet and learn from each other. It had teaching rooms, a big kitchen for cooking classes, a library with books and materials from both cultures, and a small apartment where Derek stayed when he wasn't at his original place. He had kept his old apartment too, much to everyone's surprise. The Sovereign had been right when they said Derek didn't need a palace. But Derek had accepted enough help to finally get his mom the medical treatment she needed and to pay for his brother's entire medical school education. His brother was now in his second year, studying to become a doctor, and he called Derek every week to thank him. Derek's phone buzzed with a reminder. "All right everyone, next session starts in 15 minutes. Today we're talking about volunteering, working without getting paid to help your community." The Cree diplomats looked at each other with confused expressions. This was always the hardest concept to explain. The Cree understood duty and honor, but the human idea of freely giving your time and effort without any obligation or payment was completely foreign to them. "Perhaps another story would help?" Ambassador Thane suggested. The Cree had developed a real appetite for Derek's stories about ordinary human kindness. The teenager who mowed lawns for elderly neighbors, the woman who paid for a stranger's groceries, the community that rebuilt a house after a fire. "Okay," Derek agreed, settling into his chair. "Let me tell you about my neighbor Tom. He's a mechanic who spends every Saturday at the youth center teaching kids how to fix cars. Doesn't charge anything. Just does it because he thinks it's important." As Derek spoke, he watched the Cree lean in, genuinely interested. This had become his life now. Not fancy speeches or formal meetings but simple conversations about what it meant to care for each other. The Sovereign visited once a month, always arriving quietly with minimal guards, to sit in on these sessions and ask questions. After class, Derek found Ambassador Thane waiting by the door. The diplomat looked like he wanted to say something important. "I need to tell you something," Thane began. "When I was first assigned to Earth, I thought humans were weak, soft. Your planet has no powerful military. Your technology is generations behind ours. We saw you as insignificant in galactic affairs. And now?" Derek asked, though he could guess where this was going. "Now I understand we were measuring the wrong things entirely. Your strength is not in weapons or technology. It is in your willingness to help without expecting anything back. This is powerful in a way we never considered." Thane paused, seeming almost embarrassed. "I have started volunteering at a human shelter for people without homes. This concept of giving back to your community, it brings me satisfaction I never expected. I feel more fulfilled doing this than I ever did in traditional diplomatic work." Derek smiled. This was happening more and more. Cree who came to Earth out of diplomatic duty were staying to learn, to participate, to understand. And when they returned home they brought these ideas with them. The ripple effect was real. The changes were spreading. The Sovereign had created something called the Hammond Fellowship, named after Derek, though he had protested, that sent young Cree to live with human families for a year. They learned how humans lived, worked, and helped each other. Earth's standing in the galactic community had skyrocketed, not because of military power or technological breakthroughs, but because humans had something others wanted to understand: how to build communities based on compassion instead of just rules and order. That evening, Derek returned to his original apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez was watering his plants, something she had insisted on doing since the spaceship incident. She refused any payment, saying that neighbors helped each other. "Big day?" she asked. "Just normal stuff," Teaching aliens about pizza and the importance of volunteering. Mrs. Rodriguez laughed. Your life is anything but normal, Derek Hammond? Maybe. But I'm still me. Still just trying to help where I can. Later that night, Derek received a video call from the Sovereign. Scout's face appeared first, excitedly holding up a drawing. Derek and Scout sharing a sandwich with spaceships in the background. Look what I made for my cultural studies class. I told everyone about how you saved me and taught me about human kindness. The Sovereign's face appeared next to Scout's. Derek, I wanted you to know, the High Council met today. They have decided to incorporate some of your human concepts into Kree society. We are establishing community service programs. We are creating support systems for those in need that go beyond basic legal requirements. You have changed us fundamentally. I just shared what humans already do every day, Derek said honestly. Yes. And that is precisely what we needed to see. The Sovereign's expression was warm. Scout asks constantly about returning to Earth. They want to help at your community programs. Tell Scout they're welcome anytime. We're serving meals at the shelter next weekend. Could always use extra hands. After the call ended, Derek looked around his modest apartment. Same old furniture. Same water stain on the ceiling he still hadn't fixed. Same view of the parking lot. But everything felt different now. He thought about that night 6 months ago when he found a scared, hungry child hiding behind shipping containers. Such a small decision. Just choosing to share his sandwich instead of walking away. Yet it had somehow changed the relationship between two civilizations. Derek had learned something profound through all of this. Big dramatic actions got attention, sure. But it was the small acts of kindness, repeated day after day by millions of ordinary people, that actually changed the world. Humans had been doing this forever, so naturally that they didn't even notice how special it was. But to others in the galaxy, it was revolutionary. His phone buzzed again, a text from the shelter asking if he could help tomorrow morning. Derek smiled and typed back a quick yes. Then his brother sent him a photo from medical school. Then Mrs. Rodriguez invited him to dinner. Then a reminder popped up about Scout's next visit. Derek's life was full now. Busy, complicated, sometimes overwhelming. But good. Really truly good. He had quit his restaurant job but kept his position at the transit hub. 3 nights a week he still pushed that cleaning cart down those same corridors. Some people thought it was strange that someone who advised alien diplomats still mopped floors. But Derek liked the work. It kept him grounded. Reminded him of who he was before all this started. Plus, he never knew when he might find someone else who needed help. Derek Hammond, former full-time janitor, current cultural liaison, and forever friend to a grateful alien child, turned off his lights and got ready for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to show the galaxy what humanity was really about. And it had all started with one sandwich and the simple decision to help someone in need. That was the most human thing of all, seeing suffering and choosing to care. Not because you had to. Not because you'd get something in return. Just because it was right. As Derek drifted off to sleep he smiled.